Today titled Winning Strategies for NSF Career Proposals. This webinar is part of MSU's Broader Impacts Spring 2022 workshop series. My name is Lauren Ernie Flessner, and I work in MSU's College of Engineering. My colleague Sarah Steenrod from the Office of Research and Innovation and I will be moderating today's session. It is my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. We are delighted to be joined by Dr. Angela Wilson, who is a Hanna Distinguished Professor of Chemistry and former Director of the Chemistry Division of the NSF. Dr. Kyla Dahlin, an Assistant Professor in Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences. Dr. Ganz, an Assistant Professor in Integrative Biology, and Dr. Mohammed Rabnawaz, an Assistant Professor in MSU's School of Packaging. Dr. Wilson will be starting the session today by presenting and sharing her advice for writing a competitive career proposal. And then we will transition into the panel discussion portion of the event. And all of our panelists will share their valuable advice with you based on their experience writing successful career proposals that integrate their research and education plans. As we go through the panel discussion today, if you have any questions for our panelists, please ask them using the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. Closed captioning will be available for today's webinar, and we will also be recording the event and posting it on the website of University Outreach and Engagement for viewing later. And with that, thank you everyone for joining us, and I will turn the stage over to Angela Wilson.
So good morning, everyone. Let me go ahead and get my slides up here. I'm really delighted to have a conversation with you today about NSF Career Awards. I think they're really very important. I know that in my own career, long ago, I was also an awardee, an NSF Career Awardee, and I know what a difference it can make in terms of career. And so I'm really glad that everyone here is thinking about an NSF career proposal. It is very worthwhile endeavor. Not everyone gets funded. The funding rates range from about 15 to about 25%, depending upon division, but indeed it is definitely worth doing. I'll share some strategies today with you, and if any of you want to follow up with questions or anything, you're welcome to do that. You can find me in the chemistry department. I'm also Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives in the College of Natural Sciences. So through the years, as I mentioned, I was an NSF career awarding myself, and really most of the program has not really changed at all from when I got it way back when. And so, some of the advice I'm providing is certainly from my own experiences writing an NSF career award, a career proposal, but then also I've been on many different career panels, many different NSF panels through the years. And as was mentioned, I was also head of the chemistry division for about 2.5-year period. They bring people from academia to NSF to serve as rotators in many divisions. It includes the head of the division, but there's also lots of different program manager positions. So some of what I'm going to tell you about, you need to think about kind of who your audience is when you're putting together an NSF proposal. Your audience is really kind of the reviewers, who are largely going to be professors, mainly from U.S. universities, but sometimes they do bring in people from other federal agencies, but they also bring in people from other countries as well to serve on NSF panels. And it's really a range of people on the career panel, and they're not generally just in your very specific field. So it's a pretty diverse audience that you are actually writing a proposal for. You're also really kind of targeting the program manager, and you're going to be doing a lot of interactions with the program manager. I think that's really important towards success. And your program managers, most of the program managers or program officers, actually about almost half of them do come from universities on loan from a university. So they are university professors like you are. They've been through lots of different proposal writings. They've got lots of strategies, but they're not necessarily going to be your program officer from year to year, because many of them only stay for a year or two. So you need to keep that in mind with some of what I'm going to share with you today. I think one really important strategy is to ask to serve on a panel. There is nothing like seeing what the proposal process, review process is like you know, having a chance to review an individual proposal is fine, but the discussions in a panel are so incredibly worthwhile. NSF career proposals are actually all reviewed by panel. And so it will be a panel of your peers. So people in kind of close to your area of science, not necessarily exact area, but close. And so these are the people who are going to be looking at it and providing a recommendation to the program manager, who then makes their decisions and then recommends to the division director. So there's a few things that definitely to take into consideration. First of all, I would suggest applying for this as soon as you can. You have 3 opportunities to try, but you cannot be tenured yet. And so, if you have the opportunity, try to give yourself those 3 opportunities, but also make sure that the first proposal you send in is not just testing the waters, that it really is a very solid proposal. It will stand out. Often proposals are not funded first time out. Sometimes it takes a second or third time. You want to make sure that first one really stands out. And so it's harder for somebody to say second time, oh, no, we're not going to fund this one. I suggest that one of the things as you're preparing a proposal, you need to have 10 products on your resume, on your NSF Biosketch. And 10 products really means, in most fields, it means publications in peer-reviewed journals. And so sometimes when you're starting your career, you don't quite have that 10 yet. I would get to that 10 as quickly as you can. You do not want to submit with 8 products or whatever. You want to make sure that that section is filled out. In some fields, very easy to get a lot of publications. Some areas it's harder. And so you want to make sure that you have that base covered, really important. You want to make sure that in your proposal, you are identifying several possible projects that include long, medium, and near-term goals. Don't just have one project, because if it's just one project, if it does not work, then your reviewers are going to be highly concerned about the risk in terms of NSF investment, 5-year investment into a project. So even if everything comes under the same umbrella, you want to have some long, medium, and near-term goals. You want to have some successes that you can have, that you can almost kind of roll over. You can basically just spend about a year and you can get to them, or year or 2 years. You also have some that you want to really have something that kind of extends across a bigger challenge that extends across that 5-year period. So you want to make sure that you propose enough work to really fill a 5-year period. So important is to read the program announcement thoroughly. I had 40 program managers working for me when I was at NSF, and there would be nothing that frustrated them more than a PI that calls them up and wants to say, well, so what is the format of my Biosketch, or what is the format? Make sure that you do read that program announcement very, very thoroughly. Read about the division, and you need to figure out the research that is supported within the division. If you are, if you're doing drug discovery, you will look at the biology program. You'll look at the chemistry program.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry, my Siri's talking to me. I'm so sorry. You want to make sure that the division does support what you are proposing. If you're doing drug discovery, NSF is not the place to do drug discovery. And so there's components of it that you can pitch that is not as drug discovery, but some of the basic science you could certainly pitch. But you do need to identify which program is the best match. The best way to do that is, go through the, NSF staff page, for each of the divisions that are relevant to your area. Take a look at those. Take a look at, the program will also list in general what they fund. Read through that, see who the relevant program officers are, and identify one. Start with one. You may cross over several different disciplines, but start with one, and email that program officer. Email them at least several months in advance of the career proposal deadline. And you should do this for every proposal you do for NSF. And so I would contact them probably around March, April. The deadline is in July. So certainly show them that you're thinking about this well in advance. So I would send them emails sometime in March and ask them if they have time for a conversation. Set up an appointment. Be ready with several different questions and be ready to just give them a very brief overview in terms of what you're thinking about. Have a couple different ideas in your back pocket in terms of areas that you are interested in investigating. In the email to them, just tell them that, hey, I'm interested in investigating, development of computational methods for XYZ. Keep it very brief, but at least they can tell you very much from that email. They can tell if they're the right program officer or if they need to, refer you to somebody else. Do not ask questions that are already addressed in the program announcement, and that's really kind of making sure you've read that announcement. Put together, when you are putting together your proposal, I would really strongly suggest that you put it together at least, have your project description, a very good draft of it, at least a month before the deadline. Sooner than that, if possible. You may see some of your senior colleagues, putting things together 2 days before it's due. Chances are they've probably written 50 proposals or quite a few proposals. But especially, this first time out for a career, I strongly suggest you do in advance and have other people read it. Your PhD advisor might be appropriate, or postdoc advisor if that's relevant. But if they're really close to what you're looking at, they may not be the right person, because you want to make sure that you're not, whoever's reviewing it is not an area that's necessarily going to compete with you. And so you want to make sure that you are submitting it to somebody, maybe somebody in your department can take a look at it. The more eyes you have it at this stage, you want the criticism. You want to get that. You want to basically get all of this ironed out. So I think that's a very helpful strategy. You can also look at the prior career award descriptions in the NSF award database, very helpful to look at. The description will include the broader impacts components, because I think a lot of times people have a lot of questions about what to include in terms of broader impacts, as well as kind of the educational activities, what works and what doesn't. This will also give you a little bit of insight in terms of what works for your particular area. I do encourage you to be creative with your broader impacts, and we'll talk about that, throughout this, the next hour or so. But certainly there are some programs that fund various things and don't fund various things, and I'll give you an example of that in a moment. So just do be careful about that. Now, with the NSF career program, a proposal will not be funded because of the broader impacts. You may have the most amazing idea in terms of broader impacts and educational activities alone. You've got to have really excellent science as well. So it's really the combination of excellent science and excellent broader impacts and educational activities that gets a career proposal funded. The excellent broader impacts and educational activities are really important. You can't have that area be weak and the most amazing science, because that won't be funded through the career program either. There does need to be some synergy between the research and educational activities. And what I mean by that is, for example, I'm a chemist, and so I could propose, some of my research is really kind of developing computational chemistry methods. And so I could do that. And then if my educational activities was going out, bringing kids out to a field to plant carrots, there's a real big disconnect there. And so there needs to be a connection, but it doesn't have to be incredibly tight. Like, I don't have to be teaching everyone else, a bunch of kids or the public how to program, use Python or whatever. I can basically go out and do outreach to kids or adults in just on a topic in chemistry. And so that's kind of what I mean in terms of synergy. The educational activities should be supported by the literature and be as rigorous as the research section. And no, this does not mean you have to become an educational researcher. It's very easy to find in journals, look for good education journals that are tied in your field. Like, I would be looking at the Journal of Chemical Education, for instance. Look at journals that are related in your field based upon education, and you will find lots of references talking about whatever you're planning to do, how it's relevant and how it's important to kind of, changing the pipeline, changing public perception of science, whatever change you're trying to make happen. Make sure that you are finding references, and I would suggest about 10 to 15 references to cover this dimension of your effort. You may find more. You don't have to get carried away, but certainly identify some key references. The NSF program announcement does provide a list of ideas for education activities. I encourage you to be creative, but I also encourage you to be careful, and I'll talk about that momentarily. So from the call, what you're going to see is that broader impacts may be accomplished through the research itself. Don't do that. Okay, you can certainly say the broader impacts like mine, people are going to use the methodology across the globe. Fine. Okay, that's great. That's one piece of it. But you need to go beyond the research itself for broader impacts. You can certainly mention that as part of broader impacts, but you really should be doing something else in the world besides, in addition to that, especially with the career proposal. I would say with any NSF proposal, but certainly with the career proposal. Now, when you identify your broader impacts, your education component, make sure you identify something that you don't think, hey, this is what's going to impress the reviewers. You've got to identify something that you would enjoy getting engaged in, because it's with you for 5 years. You are expected to show results on this. And so it also comes through your passion. If you really identify something you're very engaged in, that passion certainly comes through in your writing. I guarantee that. What I suggest is really identifying kind of a multi-tiered approach, just like on the research, a multi-tiered approach. In case if somebody doesn't like one dimension of your project, you have a lot of other pieces of the project that are quite interesting. Same thing with the broader impacts. I always have a multi-tiered approach to the education broader impacts, one bigger piece, and then I may have additional things like I may give talks at a school or whatever the case might be, just so you have it looks much richer to have multiple items. And then if somebody doesn't like if you just have one item, if somebody doesn't like it, then you supplement it with other things. And odds are this will catch the eye of people on the review panel that you are doing a number of different activities. Now, one thing I've seen is that it's clear that like somebody's students are going to be engaged in the activities, and it's not really clear that the PI, that the investigator is going to be engaged in them as well. Make sure that it is an activity that is going to engage you, and it can certainly be, one or more of your activities are also ones that can engage your research team. But be careful, because I have seen some proposals, and I've seen this not go well, where proposals have said, well, we are going to target women in science or women in this or whatever. So we are going to have our women students from my research team work on this. No, do not segregate like that. You want to make sure that everyone is, if you're going to have your research team engaged, it's going to be your whole team and you, not just a segment of your team. You also need to make sure that you're not that whatever you propose does not take too much time. You don't want to kind of, have this project that it is clear it is going to take 20 hours a week for the next 5 years. You want to have something that you can invest in, a few activities here and there, but not something that is going to be so time consuming that people are going to question whether or not you're going to be doing enough research at this stage of your career. They want to make sure that you are certainly investing in terms of, investing in this, but really investing in your research. Now, despite what the NSF guidelines say, most of the divisions and programs do not look favorably upon curriculum development for the broader impacts piece, because the presumption is that you will be doing classes, modifying classes, you will be coming up with new classes, that this is a part of your job as a professor. So most programs, there are some exceptions, do not view this, and many panels do not view this favorably. You can say maybe you're doing something a little bit different. That could be a small piece, don't write much about it, a small piece of a multi-tiered program, but this I do not suggest being a focus at all. It is a very slippery slope. Some divisions programs, some people I've seen actually propose doing K through 12 curriculum development. Again, very risky. I would stay away from curriculum development. Don't call it curriculum development. You can work with teachers, you can do a lot of things, but curriculum development is much more in the domain of there's other programs where NSF where you can actually do curriculum development, all of that. I would just be real careful about doing that as your broader impacts, your education component of an NSF career award. Again, it's mentioned in the call. And if you are thinking about doing this, I would strongly suggest a conversation about not only your research, but what you're thinking about for broader impacts with your program when you have your conversation with your program officer to really get a vibe about possible interest. When you talk with your program officer, I have seen people talk with program officers and they really push. They try to push their idea, in terms of research or broader impact or whatever. And I see the program officer just kind of shaking their head, okay, great. Okay, we'll see your proposal. That is not the conversation you want to have. You want to do largely listen. You want to say, okay, so here's kind of what I was thinking about. What do you think? Is this something I should be pursuing? Does this sound like a good direction? What are your thoughts? They're not going to tell you exactly what pathway to go, but listen, truly listen. They may say, we've seen a lot of things in that area and they've not really gone well, or, there's a little, if they kind of hesitate, get a clue on that. Really listen, because you want to make sure that you are proposing something that they think might have a chance of funding. And they know best in terms of what is and what is not getting funded. They're not going to tell you the magic formula, the magic, research idea that is going to get you there, but they are going to kind of try to help steer you if you will listen. And listening is so incredibly important when you talk to your program officers. If you find yourself, talking even over 50% of that call, you need to stop and you need to start listening to truly what they're saying. Most or many NSF career proposals are not funded in their first submission. That's why there are 3 opportunities. If you get funded the first time, yay, wonderful. But many, it's the second or third time. This is fine. Learn from the experience. You put a very strong proposal forward and learn. Every single proposal, especially early in your career, even later in your career, they're learning opportunities. What can I do differently? Are there different ways I should phrase this? What's the problem with this? Oh my gosh, I missed this reference. You try not to do that, but sometimes that happens. When you get the reviews, relish the positive comments. So that's the first thing you should do when you get them. Don't look for the negative. If you've gotten a no, go through the proposal. Go through the comments, look at them, look for all the positives. You want to make yourself feel better, first of all, for the no. No, realize that everyone's gotten a no. I had Nobel laureates who were applying for grant proposals, and many of them got no's. We all get no's at some point. So realize that. So when you get the reviews, relish the positive comments. Go through, celebrate those. Ignore the negative initially. That first look, because most people get a little irritated when they don't get funding, understandable. Look for the positive. Okay. Be ready for criticism then, maybe look at it a couple of days later. Okay. Then cross out all the positives. Cross them out. Print it out, mark off the positives. Because I've seen people say, my proposal, look, all these great comments. I just don't understand why it wasn't funded. It should have been funded. I had great comments. What you need to do is cross those positive comments out and then focus on the negative. Grab yourself a glass of wine or whatever is going to help calm you down when you start looking at those, but start taking a look at those. Start focusing on those. Some of them, I'll be honest with you, the review system is not perfect. So some of them you very much may disagree with, but some of them really take them to heart. Think about, well, is there a different way I could have said that? Oh yeah, that was a bit of a problem. Start thinking about, next time, what can I do next time? Once you've calmed down about everything, after at least 2 weeks, email your program officer and say, hey, do you have time to discuss my proposal? I've gone through the comments and I'd like to know what I can do better for next time. Can we have a conversation? And that's really important. Do not get on the call with the program officer and try to convince them that, that they made the wrong decision, that the reviewers were wrong. They may have been wrong, but what's done is done, because the only way NSF re-reviews a proposal is if there's something wrong in the process. It doesn't mean that you got a bad review or somebody didn't read your proposal right or whatever. That doesn't count. It has to be some sort of technical issue in terms of why it was not supported. And I think I saw I'm not even sure if I saw one overturned. It involves a lot of different people. I mean, I looked at a number of them and I agreed with the program officer. I mean, I looked at it in a very balanced way and I agreed with the program officer every time. And this was, you know, it goes to another division then in terms of, you know, if there starts being appeals. Don't appeal. Don't appeal. If you think you need to appeal, come find me, talk with me, and we can have a conversation about that. And I'll truly give a real look in terms of what you have and the situation. But in general, I don't see those procedural errors that is required for basically overturning a review. So you want to make sure you have this conversation with the program officer. Make sure when you talk with them that you do not spend your time, well, this was wrong and they were wrong and this was wrong. Go in there very humbly and just say, thank you so much for your time. I really would like to improve the proposal. Indicate you've read the reviews and ask, you know, are there some other aspects I need to think about addressing? Because then you ask that question, they will start telling you about some of the things that occurred during the panel discussions. There's only so much written down. There's a lot more that occurs during the panel discussions. And then the program officer will start sharing you more in order, and this is very helpful in terms of improving your proposal next time around. If you show that the program officer that you're very easy to deal with, to work with, if you show that you're willing to listen and learn, you take criticism well, you're not going to criticize the program officer, the review process, the reviewers, you will find you have a strong advocate going forward. You know, that is, I mean, and I tell you, it's a wonderful way to really build relationships at NSF. You don't want to burn relationships. I would have calls, I would have program officers that would say, okay, this person is really giving me a lot of grief. We're going to have another conversation. And so there are times where I'd be like, okay, I'm going to join you on that call. And I've had to tell researchers that, you know, to cool it. And, you know, so you don't want to have that discussion ever with the division director. So lots of different opportunities here, lots of routes for success. Everyone gets criticism, take it well and go forward. If you are submitting a second time, what I suggest you do, because the panels change, your program officer, if you have a rotator, you may not have the same program officer the next year. What I suggest that you do is you have a preamble at the start of your proposal. You can say, I mean, it's up to you. I always do this, but not everyone does. It's up to you. But I usually have a paragraph because I've gone early in my career, I bounced back and forth. You know, one review would say one thing, then I go to the next panel, then they'd say the exact opposite thing. And so I got a little tired of being bounced around a bit. So I would start off with a preamble that would say, we have addressed the previous reviews. We have done XYZ. You may want to do it. You may not want to do it. Just something to think about. And I just do a little preamble in terms of we have addressed this, we've addressed that. And so just, you know, it's a strategy you may or may not want to try. I found it to be quite successful. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop. I know we have a rich discussion on many other things today. So thank you for the time. And I wish you all the very best in pursuing this and strongly encourage you to do this. Whether you win or lose, I wouldn't say win or lose. You never really lose in this. Even if you're not funded, it may seem like you're losing, but truly it's a win because you've developed a rapport with the program manager. You made contacts at NSF. You put together a nice proposal. You've got a lot of different ideas that stem from that, and you can certainly get funded in other ways as well. So with that, I wish you all the best. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Angela. That was incredibly informational and useful. We've had a couple of questions come up in the Q&A related to your presentation. So I thought we would go through those first and then open it up to the panel. We have the first question is, will the slides be available after the talk? Would you be willing to share these slides?
Yeah, I can, yes.
Who do you ask in order to serve on an NSF panel?
Thank you. That is a wonderful question. So I realized as I was finishing up, I hadn't mentioned that. So what I suggest in terms of strategy for that, some people just reach out to a program officer. So like when you're trying to figure out what area does your research best fit in, you can find the name of a program officer. So what I would suggest is emailing that program officer, but also email the deputy division director from that NSF division. I would copy that person on the email and just indicate that you're an assistant professor and you would like to serve on a panel. You'd like to get that experience and insight. I think that's really important. The reason why you want to copy the deputy division director is the deputy division director is a permanent staff person at most NSF divisions. And so just in case if the program officer is busy, they don't record it, whatever, the deputy division director is keeping track of who's on what panel and all of that. And so if you send email to them, they will get you in the system. You may not get called on for 3 years. I mean, and maybe some time, especially now, I know there's a lot more virtual panels, but certainly it is a way to get kind of in the system. And I think that's important. A lot of the program officers go to different NSF, they have different NSF exhibitions and stuff at different conferences. I encourage you to go to that. Some of the divisions, like the chemistry division, has an early career event. They take about 100 faculty from all over the country that are assistant professors to go through basically a 2 to 3 day training program. And this is great because you do mock panels, you get to know all of the different program officers within the chemistry division. So it's a great way to interact and learn a lot about NSF and proposals, make those vital networking contacts, but then also have that opportunity to go through mock panel and see what works and what doesn't. And you will actually be reviewing people who donated proposals, ones that were funded, ones that weren't funded, so you can go through that process and get an idea of what's successful and what is not.
We have a question here. So they say, when you mention 10 products, will co-author publications count? Or is it necessary to be the first or author or corresponding author on the publications?
Publications are publications. So yeah, just make sure you have 10 publications. So, and peer review journal, so.
Okay, and we've got, I'm curious about the suggestion to reach out to the program officer. It's a common suggestion. The program officer of the division I'm interested in told me that they cannot entertain such discussions. Does this vary widely across divisions?
That is a rarity. Yeah. So, if there's another one, and sometimes it's how you frame the question as well. You can frame the question as, hey, I'm interested in applying for this program. I've read the program description. Do you have time, for a few discussion, for a small discussion? You could just leave it at that. Some program officers, especially ones who are very new, who are rotators, unfortunately, I've seen a few of them that say they won't entertain a discussion or whatever. I would not advertise to anyone. You could reach out to the deputy division director and email them and say, hey, I'd like to have a conversation with somebody about this. Don't say you contacted anybody and they said no. I would just write to him and say, hey, who should I contact? And I would just go through that route. So there should be somebody willing to talk with them. And if not, let me know and I will make sure.
We have a question. Are collaborative projects viewed positively?
For career, no. For career, for career, it's really kind of independent research. You can have people who like if I do all computations. So if I really needed to have an experimental part, I could certainly say that I have a collaborator. I can get, a letter of collaboration. Note that letters of collaborations can only say one line, generic line. So take a look at the directions on that. But that's okay as long as your proposal is not fully dependent upon that. And so, there's lots of different NSF programs that do entertain collaborations, which are just fine. The career is just kind of, it's you. It's what are you doing? What are you going to do in terms of research? It can be collaborative, but again, it needs to be a project that can stand alone. If your collaboration doesn't come together, you're not going to be funding that with the career proposal. So.
Okay, I think we'll do one more and then I think we'll open it up to the panel and then we can come back to questions at the end. This one has to do with, it says, thanks so much, Angela. This is very useful. Because of CR, my current career proposal is still pending. Not sure if this is good or bad. Should I continue to wait before approaching my PO for possible resubmission? The problem is that I don't know what the review looks like.
Yeah. You'll be hearing very soon because NSF is required to make decisions on proposals, 70% of proposals within 6 months. They do have to clear out everything in terms of career proposals by it's going to be by sometime in June. And so I would guess that most of them get cleared out basically March, April, because those funding decisions have to be made. Your program officer will reach out to you if it's kind of beyond that, most likely, and tell you that, hey, yours is kind of, we're waiting to see in terms of money. So you should be hearing certainly within the next month or two, and that will give you a bit of a window. Not a huge window, but a bit of a window. And in that case, if you're not funded, I would encourage not waiting a week or two. I would get back to the program officer right away, digest those reviews, and then have that positive conversation in terms of going forward. So.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to open the discussion up to the panel. So we're going to start it off with the question. So will each of you please briefly describe the topic of your career proposal? I don't know who wants to start off.
I can go.
Perfect.
So my career proposal is in IOS, so it's in the biology division, and it deals with figuring out the genetic program that regulates neuronal development in one part of the nervous system. And it's focusing specifically on the nervous system that sits on top of the gut. So we know very little about what genetic factors regulate neuronal development in that part of the nervous system. And one particular aspect that I targeted in this proposal, kind of the overarching question is, if you think of the gut, you have all the subdivisions, stomach and other parts of the gut. And in this proposal, I want to figure out, sort of coming in from different angles, if there are region-specific programs within each part of the gut, or if there's sort of an overarching, overall neuronal program that regulates neuronal development. And we're going to talk about the educational broad impacts in the next question, right? So I'm going to leave that.
Should I go next?
Sure, thanks, Mohammed.
Absolutely. So my proposal was about transforming recycled plastic into the engineering property materials, replacing thermosets. So there are plastics like thermosets that even if you collect them, you cannot recycle them. So we were trying to make thermosets material from the recycled feedstock, but still you can recycle them virtually for certain number of times. So that was like, and trying to bridge the gap between the thermoplastic and thermoset and engineering materials, trying to minimize the number of plastic that we use today. So I don't know if you are familiar with this, but today we are using 13,000 different plastics. 13,000, right? So we are trying to bring that number simply down such that we can easily recycle them. Yes.
And I guess I'll go last. So I'm in the geography department at MSU, but my career award is through the Division of Environmental Biology in the Bio Directorate. And my research is focused on the idea that we know that plants play this critical role in the climate system by taking up carbon dioxide, but we can't really measure that at large scales because ecosystems are really complicated and the world is really big. And so in this, my career project is focused on using images collected from airplanes and satellites and computer models to try to make better estimates of forest carbon uptake. And this work was focused on the Eastern United States and relying on satellite imagery from NASA and data collected by the NSF-funded National Ecological Observatory Network. And I'm sort of in this project really focused at regional to landscape scales, but my longer term goal is to expand to larger spatial scales.
Thank you all so much for sharing the topic of your career proposals. How did each of you integrate your research, education, and broader impacts activities in your career proposals? Kyla, do you want to start out?
Sure. So I had sort of 4 components of education and outreach, the big one being starting a week-long field course for graduate students and early postdocs focused on integrating ecology and remote sensing, which is what I mostly do. And there are a couple within my sort of broader field, there are a couple of these pretty famous week-long field courses, and there's been a lot of people excited about the idea that somebody should start one for this particular subfield, but nobody actually ever did it. And so it was like not necessarily an original idea, but one that I think people appreciated the need for, and nobody else seemed to really want to do. But so it's you know, it's not directly related to my specific research interests, but more about like bringing this sort of subfield to more people. Excuse me, I also included building some public outreach materials on Google Earth, which is again in the sort of mapping space, sharing undergraduate course materials, so not just developing them for my own courses, but putting them into these sort of larger databases, and then writing for public audiences. So those are 4 components with one really big one.
Thank you so much, Kyla. Who would like to go next?
I can go.
Okay.
Yeah, so honestly, I was just doing like copy paste, looking into the previous regular NSF proposal, K-12, and all those curriculum development, and just Angela Wilson mentioned, those are sometimes not going to really fly with the program officer. So I talked to program officer. I told him, hey, this is what I want to do. Can you tell me something like, how do you feel about that? And I was just listening mostly. And he said, look, something that really like industry engagement, arranging trips for the student to visit local industry and bringing industry speakers. And I got those clues, and then I integrated that into my proposal, and it was really appreciated by the reviewers as well. So, but of course, you can't rely on just one piece of those. So I put the industry engagement piece there. I also put the K-12 and particularly the minority. So those are the key components that I put there.
So I had 3 components for my education and broader impacts. So one of my aims basically proposes to do a CRISPR screen, like a CRISPR genome editing screen. And based on this, my first activity for a sort of educational component is to develop a 2-week course. Well, actually a longer course, but my portion would be 2 weeks on CRISPR genome editing. And because I use zebrafish as my model organism, it's actually possible for students to really do sort of a hands-on, do it all hands-on, do genome editing themselves, learn all the parts of the process. And I linked it back to my research because in that course, they will actually test some of the targets that I have in the screen. So the screen is basically, to test the function of 36 genes on neuronal development. So in that course, they're already testing some of my targets. And then the second component is to do, to have undergrad research in my lab and to couple this with professional development. So not only, have undergrad students in the lab, but also I'm going to develop sort of a professional development curriculum for them to really enhance their process in doing research and learn more than just the research activity. And also they are focused on early students that basically just come into college to help them also be retained in STEM fields. And those students are also going to do CRISPR genome editing, and they're also going to do more. I mean, they're going to do most of the targets that I proposed to do. So my aim 3 is going to be basically completely covered both by the course and by undergrad students that I have in my lab. And then as a last outreach activity, we're going to prepare a booth for the science festival, and the neuroscience program basically has like a neuroscience fair. And that's going to focus on also conveying to the public what CRISPR genome editing is about, but then also to highlight zebrafish as a research organism, because a lot of people that you tell that you use zebrafish, they're like, zebrafish, do they even, do they even have a gut or a brain or whatever? And they're really, they're really attractive to show, because you can show the embryos that are transparent, you can see the beating heart. So it's very, sort of aesthetically pleasing and really directly visual appealing to show to the public what research is about and what you can do research-wise with them.
Thank you so much. At this time, we're happy to take questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into the Q&A feature. And while we wait, I was wondering, what tips do you have for faculty as they write about the educational activities specifically in the career proposal?
I would say try to be creative and try to think a little bit out. I mean, try to see if there's something that you would like to do that's a little bit more outside of the box. I mean, I think Angela already said this. I think those educational or broader impacts really work best if you're really excited about them, and sort of if that's also something that you are interested in doing in terms of outreach. So see what you want to do, what you are excited to write about, but then also see if there's something that is a little bit unusual. I mean, my broader impacts, I think, are, maybe not the best example because they're relatively typical with, developing a course and undergrad research, but it fit well with my proposal, so it made sense. But, if you have time to think about something that's a little bit more outside the sort of usual things that are done, I think that's really useful. And, look around at MSU, there's a lot of broader impact help where you can talk through ideas and see how to develop them better.
I'll just add, I think for the education components, like taking assessment really seriously, I think that increasingly NSF is more and more aware of the fact that like we do all this stuff, but everyone's just like, I did it, it was fine. And so, talking to somebody in the education, in the School of Education, or at least reading about like what assessment is, and not just being like, and we'll assess this, but actually saying like, we'll do, pre and post intervention things and stuff. Like actually, spending some time and some space in your proposal writing about how you're going to assess whatever it is you're going to do, so you can show that it was actually successful. Hopefully.
I think Julia and Kyla mentioned those two pieces, and those were I was thinking too. One thing that we need to be aware of that this time right now, there's a lack of the skilled workforce from the US Labor Department. If you read the report, there is a lot of shortage of the skilled workforce. So if you put something there that you will be able to provide or develop particular opportunities to create skilled workforce, that's going to fly with the NSF these days, I believe so. And also, don't share everything with in my opinion, Angela can talk about that one, but when you talk to the program officer, just share briefly this is what you plan to do with outreach or the educational component. Listen to them, how they feel about that, and and be more creative. That's it. Sometimes there is always a balance, like what you should propose, you propose more or less. There's also a problem. So I think in this situation, Sarah helped me. Sarah is the grant editor, and she helped me like, she told me that you are proposing too much, so we cut down a few of them, and that were well received, I will say, from the NSF. Like those were, you need to keep that moderate balance. You can't just focus on the educational component so much that your research component looks thinner, right? So.
I don't know if I can hop in. Is that okay? Because I couldn't type anything in the box. So sorry about that. So thank you. So I want to add on to what Mohammed was saying, because, certainly there's some priorities. So NSF has got the National Science Board, and the National Science Board is kind of an advisory board for NSF. And so they've got their Vision 2030 report. If you're looking at broader impacts, you can mention this Vision 2030 report. And one of the things they talk about are the missing millions. Look for the slideshow on this, and it talks about how we need to reach out to historically underrepresented populations to really fill the job needs of even 2030. And so this is something you can certainly play into. We have a state that's very rich. We have, a larger Native American population than many other states. Not many places are doing outreach with some of with some of that population. We've got Detroit. There's lots of activities we could be doing in Detroit. If you go to the Detroit Public Schools, I do an activity each year with about 400 high school students there. I mean, 95% of that population is Black. So lots of different and very interested. The teachers are interested in engaging in science activities. And so there are so many opportunities. MSU is also home to MSU Extension. And so we've got 650 extension officers throughout the state of Michigan that do a lot of education outreach in just about every county in Michigan. And so you can certainly, that's also a great way to try to do some sort of thing if you want to kind of spread it across the state or target certain areas of state. So I just want to put those in there. So thanks.
Yeah, one thing, can I add one thing? I think, sometimes we miss the assessment. Kyla mentioned about the assessment, right? Because most of the time we miss the assessment tools there. And this is something the reviewer will say, hey, where is the assessment plan, right? And I think the grant editors are really good in there. They really catch those things that typically we miss as a researcher. So I think engaging a grant editor like Sarah Steenrod in this case, I think that's very important to do it.
Thanks, Mohammed. So we have some questions in the chat. One person asks, if you have a single piece of advice that isn't reach out to your program officer, what would that be?
Join the career group that Sarah is leading. Or alternatively, find a group of people that you can work together with on a proposal. Doesn't have to be in your field at all. We were very diverse in Sarah's group, in terms of the topics. But having people, take the time to read your proposal and critique it early on is incredibly helpful and I think incredibly important. Because, you think it's all clear and then you give it someone to read and, they find things that they don't find clear and help you really streamline and, kind of hone your proposal. And I mean, I think that's typical advice that everyone also gives. Start early. I mean, we know it's already March. I always feel bad to say this to people but if you start now, that's great. But, the more time you have to have your proposal written already and settle and you kind of can go back to it, that is really helpful.
Start early.
And get examples from people. I think it's totally reasonable to email, people if you sort of know somebody or even not, like anybody here, who's sort of doing related environmental stuff to what I do. I'm happy to share my whole proposal with you. I think read ones that have recently been successful in your field, and generally people are mostly nice about sharing them. So yes.
Great. So the next question here is, what is the process of submission? Do I have to work with my department grant proposal person to get the budget approved by OSP or some other process? Is the process the same as a normal grant proposal submission?
I guess I'm sure we've all done this, but yes, it's the same as a normal proposal. I think the only major difference is you have to get a letter from your department chair or unit head, whatever that is. And so making sure that that's, done, that person knows that they're on the hook to do that is probably the biggest. I think it's the only real difference.
And, especially if it's a new department chair and they haven't done this before, I'm sure that your office, that the research office in your college, I'm sure they can help, help it. So another department chair, or, they can get a letter from a department chair who's written one for a successful career proposal, so they can see it and know what it looks like. So that might be helpful too, if you've got a new chair. So.
All right, we have another question. What is your suggestion regarding the budget? For example, what dollar amount should we target and how should we allocate the resource between education, BI, and research?
Talk to your program officer and ask them what in your area, what the recommended budget is. I mean, at least I discussed it with my program officer because I knew I would have to have a pretty high budget because of just the work that I do. And I wanted to make sure that that's appropriate. And he basically pretty clearly told me what, would be appropriate to ask for. And that also worked out. But, I think it's really field dependent what you can be funded with in a career. So you need to check that out with your PO. And they should know what is appropriate.
Yeah, and it's actually subfield dependent too, because in chemistry, if it was computational chemistry, 480,000, that's what you ask for. If it's on some of the biological sides, it's 750. In some of the physical sciences, it's 600. So it really depends. So definitely, talk with the program manager on this. Very, very important. And if for some reason you're not going to talk to your program officer, if you've got one who doesn't want to speak with you, anyways, I told you how to get around that. But still, if you're still having struggles, then I would check and look at the recent award database for career proposals in your area. I guarantee you there's going to be this small range in terms of what that funding is. And that will give you an idea in terms of kind of a ballpark. In terms of the balance, I mean, most of what you're going to be doing is research. And so I would say maybe 10%. I mean, talk to your program officer, but I would say no more than 10% on your education piece. Some divisions may say different than that. But I mean, take a look, talk with your program officer. I would suggest probably not going too much more over that. In some cases, your broader impacts may not have a cost, and that's okay too. So.
Yep. I think so. Most of the time when you go there, they say this is your upper budget limit, so you can ask for that one actually. But when you're talking to program officer, usually they tell these kind of things by themselves. Hey, your budget should look like that, and because they're used to it, they want to give you the more information as much as they can, right? But you can ask them actually. So.
Great. So our next question is, how much time did you give yourself to write your successful career proposal?
I submitted mine twice. So I just got it this year, and then I had submitted it also the year before in 2020. So I think the first time I didn't quite give myself enough time. I attended this panel discussion the first time I submitted it. So I also heard this, you should basically be started already. And I was like, okay. So I definitely started after this, and because I also hadn't done an NSF proposal before because I'd only submitted to NIH. There are a lot, there's just some also additional forms that you just need to submit. Doing all of this actually takes quite some time. So I was, maybe it took me 2 or 3 months to, put everything together, talk to the program officer, make sure it is appropriate and so on. The second time around, I had much more time because I had to revise my proposal. And that was really helpful because I then could really sit there and just really hone the text. Even then, it was not that, I could just sit around and just spend a couple of hours, and it was still pretty intense. But it kind of showed me how far you can bring your proposal if you have a little more time. So even though we all sound like a broken record, and I know it's hard to fit this in with everything that's going on, I mean, just try to also get a lot of the text, kind of a first draft of your proposal done as soon as you can, because if you can send it to people and they have actually time to critique it, and you can get all your parts critiqued, you can still work on all your additional documents while people are looking at the proposal. But if they have enough time, they will give you much better feedback. And that will then also help you, really, whittle it down to the perfect text that you want to submit. So, I mean, starting now is a good idea if you plan to submit this summer. And, you know, talk to your program officer also soon, because you don't want that, you know, you don't want to have this perfect thing and you send it to your program officer and he's like, you know, maybe this is not what I would submit. You want to get that feedback really early so you know what you should, if that's a good proposal or if you still need to modify it. And I mean, my program officer was actually happy to basically look at some of my proposals just to kind of go over it and say, yeah, I think this is going to work out well. I don't know if all program officers are doing this, but it's definitely worth a shot. But you need to give them time, obviously.
And I'm basically in the same boat as Yulia, that I submitted first. The first time was kind of intense, and then the second time, and mine didn't get rejected until pretty late the first time, and so it was because it was co-reviewed again by a different division, and so then the second time, I think it was like April, that I talked to the program officer and got some really great feedback, and then but then because I had a draft, or we'll just call it my first draft, I got to work with Sarah and also had time to send out my revised proposal to a bunch of colleagues and get feedback, which was super helpful.
Yeah, so I think 2 to 3 months are good enough time. Make sure you have some preliminary data. Now, I don't know, like they say we fund proposal that are outstanding without preliminary data. But I think if you have preliminary data, people start to believe in your application, right? Your hypothesis. That helped me a lot, actually. So mine one was like, when I first submitted in 2017, it was rejected. I submitted a new idea last year, the other year, and it was funded in one round. So I think I spent 2 to 3 months working with Sarah from the get-go, even from the summary when I sent it out to the program officer to discuss with them. So, but think about the preliminary data, because that's going to be your friend, right? That's going to help your application down the road to convince the reviewers that idea is working. So.
One thing I was wondering is, were any of you in a position where you were trying to narrow down the topic of your career proposal or choose from a few different topics? And if you were in that position, what was your process for making the decision to pursue the topic you ultimately pursued?
I guess I had like a pretty specific thing I wanted to do, but for me, what happened was the proposal that I submitted the first time, I had like really framed it in a theoretical space that was not something I had really published in. It's something like I think I'd thought about a lot, but I didn't really have a lot of evidence that I had worked in before. And in talking to the program officer, they basically told me, like, not just my lack of publications in this sort of theoretical space, but also just the topic that I had, that theoretical space was very controversial. It was one of these things that like was not in any of the reviews, but the program officer was just like, people get really angry when you use these specific words. And so in my revised one, I basically still said I wanted to do the same work, but I just framed it really differently and cut out all of this theoretical stuff and kind of focused more on stuff that looked more related to stuff I'd done before, and so with publications to back that up. And so it was, again, program officer was really helpful.
Yeah, I also didn't really when I actually submitted my career have to go back and forth between different projects, but the year before I actually submitted the first time, I had considered actually a different topic for my career. And I had basically written up sort of a project, kind of this one-pager thing, and sent it to the program officer. And he said, he basically said, yeah, you have to, this is not specific enough, and you would have to focus on a specific aspect, which I couldn't do at that point because I would have needed more preliminary data to then make a decision what specific aspect I want to focus on, basically. So the second time around, I anyway then wanted to focus on the project that I then submitted. But I guess also talking to the program officer really helps figuring out what projects work? And also this question, is the project too big? Is it too small? A good program officer should really tell you, no, this is not going to get funded because you should, maybe it's too much or it's not specific enough. I mean, they can really give you pretty specific advice if you give them the right tools to actually answer the question. So of course, you have to prepare your one pager or even a little bit more so they can actually judge what experiments you really want to do. And then they really want to help make your proposal the best proposal that you can submit. I mean, I think it's good to know that they're really interested in that. They want to help you do well. Like they have no interest on just sending you your way and say, figure out yourself. I mean, they want to help you.
In my case, I have one idea I submitted, so it's a straightforward case for me. But if you have more than one idea, it's not about what you feel excited about. It's about how you can make your program officer and the reviewer excited about. And that means you need to look closely to the synopsis of each program and look into, if you do this research, how it is aligned with that synopsis. And when you're writing their summaries, you can copy paste some buzzword from their synopsis such that they look to them more familiar. That will work out because we are researchers. We feel great about one thing. Next year, we don't feel great about that anyway, sometime, right? So think about how this summary, this idea is more aligned with the program where you are applying. That's going to be really your friend. This is how I see it. So.
And following that, I also suggest that, if you've got multiple ideas, I would also look and see the database, the awards database, and see what that program officer has supported recently or that particular program. Because if they've submitted 10 things on some sort of mental organic frameworks or whatever, you probably don't want to submit something that's very, very, very much aligned with that necessarily if there's too much overlap. So, that's if you can't get a hold of a program officer, best thing to do is talk to the program officer because they can guide you the best. But, in lieu of that, you can certainly look at the awards database. So, especially if you're trying to identify something unique, but is still kind of in their space.
And I mean, I think one thing that I really only realized when I started talking to the program officer at NSF, program officers have actually much more sort of power in also figuring out what they want to fund. Because at NIH, they don't. It's not, they can't, I mean, they can pull up proposals, but I think they rarely do. And I mean, it really goes more about the study section, how the study section makes a proposal, and then, kind of how it moves on in council and so on. So, figuring out what the program officer's interest is not a bad idea because also I think as Angela said, do not annoy them because if they are interested in the work you do, they can really be your strong allies and make sure that your proposal fits well. But it's not just that they say, probably the institute is interested in this. I mean, they actually also decide what to move forward, at least partially. So they can really tell you a lot about what they want to fund and what they maybe don't want to fund at the moment.
And if I may, definitely do not annoy them. I can tell you stories, but anyways, wow. Anyways, but I know that somebody said, well, that they couldn't get a hold of their program officer, the program officer wasn't responsive. And do we really have to talk to program officers? Do, because you have to do this for other agencies as well. It's important to get to know your DOE program manager. If you're doing DoD, it's really important to get to know your program manager. And so, this is just kind of a part of doing business. And if you have the opportunity to go to DC, I certainly would, at some point when COVID is kind of hopefully beyond us, but before too long, definitely go down, go to DC and have an opportunity to meet not just one program officer, try to meet multiple for people that you might possibly submit proposals to in the future. So,
Angela, I want to make a comment, but you need to correct me if I'm wrong. So I believe the program officers there at the NSF, they are well connected to each other. So if I'm talking to a program officer, hey, I have this idea, and I already shared this idea with X program officer, and I'm talking with you as well to see like where it can go and it's a good fit or not. So I believe, based on my experience, if I'm more honest and open, telling them if I already discussed this or plan to discuss this with another program officer, do you think it's going to help us or not? Like sharing with them this idea I want to discuss with another program officer. Do you think it's going to help?
Oh yeah. So I mean, they're especially the permanent staff are very well connected. The rotators try to get connected, but they don't have quite as many connections across NSF, but they certainly try to gain them, get them. Yeah, I mean, everyone wants to try to make sure that the proposal goes to kind of the best fit program, because there's nothing worse than, and I had to do this a number of times because people didn't consult ahead of time, and because some proposals can be transferred and some cannot. It really just depends upon how they come in. That's that's kind of beyond this discussion here. But if they can be, I think, it is really important to have that discussion, because sometimes proposals can't be transferred. And so when they can't be transferred, you want to make sure it's got the best fit. So the program officers are really trying to help this as well, because they hate to send proposals back, return without review, because it doesn't fit the program. That's just an awful thing. And I've had to do that a number of times. But yeah, so I think it's just perfectly fine to say, hey, yeah, I'm wondering, I thought about also talking to program officer X over in this, should I also talk with them about this? What do you think? Because some proposals are co-funded. And I think, Kyla, I think you said that yours was co-funded. Yeah, so some proposals are actually funded by two different divisions or directorates. And so sometimes having that conversation with program officer in more than one place really makes sense. And your program officer will generally tell you this too, so it's no problem at all suggesting that. They're not territorial at all. I mean, actually at NSF, they like to have other people help fund things too, because then that division money can go a lot further. So it's a good thing.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is about the strategy of timing your proposal. So since you can only participate in 3 career competitions, when do you think is the best time to apply, and how established does your research program and teaching activities need to be competitive?
I can say I waited. So my tenure stuff is in review now. So I could have submitted one more time had the proposal that got funded gotten rejected. But I basically did that based on seeing, you see people get a career award and then they announce that they got tenure 2 weeks later. And so there's lots of people, at least in my sort of sphere, that get them very late. And so I decided to wait just to have, as much. I just keep thinking of it as evidence that I have done the stuff that I'm capable of doing, the stuff that I wanted to do. And so I think the more senior you are, the more of that you have.
When I was at NSF, I saw kind of a complete range. I went twice. I got it the second time. And the first time I went was after my second year as a professor, and then I went my third year after. So it really depends upon the program. One of the challenges I found though was that getting it kind of earlier, kind of before the midpoint, was that then, as you're going through the promotion tenure process, they're like, well, you need to have renewal funding. So the career proposal wasn't enough, for the promotion tenure. They also wanted to see that you had continuing funding then as well. So just something to take into consideration. But that is just kind of a minor piece. I mean, generally, if you get a career proposal, you're publishing, generally promotion tenure happens. But I would suggest going when you feel you've got at least some preliminary data. This may be after year 1. It might be year 2, and it might be year 4 or 5, so NSF career proposals are given at all stages. And so the best thing to do is just, no one ever feels 100% ready. And so once you have some preliminary data, you have a good story together, submit it. I know Mohammed mentioned he had a little bit of a spread, so there's different strategies to use. Once you have a solid proposal, get it out there. You got 10 publications, you have an independent publication or 2, go for it. So.
Yeah, I will just endorse that one. So I tried in the second year, rejected. I tried in the 4th year or 3rd year, I guess, 4th year, and it was awarded. So I think if you have a little more research published in that area, that also give you a lot more clarity if what is working, what is not, what should be the future, right? So you possibly will have more chance if you apply in the year 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then you are good for a promotion, I guess, as well. That really helps your process there. But if you feel excited about that idea that you have, then you shouldn't wait for that. Just go ahead and submit it, right? You have 3 chances. So.
Yeah, I think make sure that you can use the 3 chances. Because you have to time it, because there just has to be that you should make sure that you can still submit it before you then get tenure. But I also agree that you need to have some preliminary data to even put a proposal together. You need to have sort of an idea and show that you support it. And I think a little bit of teaching probably also helps, because as it's also about education, if you have not taught anything at all, I think your department chair will have a harder time talking about your teaching accomplishments, which he has to or she has to in their letter. So having a little bit under your belt there, I think, is helpful. And also that you kind of know your way around MSU. If you come in and you write a career right away, it's maybe a little bit harder to really put together the best proposal. But I don't think you have to necessarily push it back to the latest possible. Just make sure you can take your 3 chances, because your career proposal is a little bit different than NSF or NH proposal. So I think writing it and then not being able to resubmit it is a little bit of kind of a little bit unfortunate, because you already put so much time in the educational portion, which is longer than a regular NSF proposal. So just timing that way, it's useful.
Yeah, and actually following that up, that's a wonderful point in terms of teaching. Also, it's not a bad idea to also make sure that you start getting engaged in some sort of broader impact, as well. And so, so then you can have some evidence that, hey, I have been doing this, I participated in this outreach or whatever. Maybe that's not what you're proposing, but at least you can show that you have been engaged. Often it's hard to engage like that as a graduate student or postdoc, you're so focused on research. So this, just kind of gives you that opportunity to develop that kind of that initial, to show that you've got a track record in that as well.
I think that helped me. That helped me in my case as well, Angela. So just to endorse your point, typically, if your educational plan has a picture of you and you're talking to the care schedule student or something, that is really could be appealing for the reviewers. They see, oh, this person is engaged. So what he's talking or she's talking about, he or she believe in that. So if you say we are doing this and those, so that certainly helps. So it's a good point.
Yeah, I had a picture of me talking to a bunch of kindergarten kids, showing them off huge high performance computing. So they're with me in this picture. So just a small corner of my career proposal, but things like that are helpful. So.
So we have an audience question. Can fixed term faculty apply for NSF Career Awards?
It's for tenured track faculty.
All right. The next question is there anything that you think a lot of applicants might overlook when they're developing their career proposals that would really increase their chances of success?
Yeah, a few things. So one thing is formatting. Formatting is important. You don't want to submit a sloppy proposal. You want to make sure it's spell check, grammar check, everything. I don't care if you're a native English speaker, you still need to go through the checks, have somebody else look at it, do a grammar check, everything else. I think that's so incredibly important. You can go down to, make sure you're paying attention to what type of font to use. Don't go too small. You can actually go to like 10.5 area. Something pretty small, but it makes things pretty unreadable. And so make sure that your proposal looks pretty. And I hate to say that, but I've seen reviewers really agitated about proposals that are hard to read or hard to follow. Unfortunately, some reviewers, some of the panels are pretty big. There's a lot of proposals that are being looked at. So make sure that your points are very clearly made up front. Make sure you've got broader impacts in there, that word in bold. Make sure the word intellectual merit is there in bold. Make it easy for the reviewers to answer the questions, and the review criteria are actually listed in the call. Make sure that it is clear for reviewers to find things. You may want to make I plan to do, in that first page, and put bullets of, the 5 things or 4 things that you plan to do, and put them right up there at the front, and make sure that, that the reviewers can find things easily. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think one other point is to see if you can really tie your educational activities and your outreach or broader impact points in really well with your research. And I mean, that also requires some planning, because the things you initially maybe want to do are not as easy to tie it in with your research. But I think especially for the career, if you can make a really good case that the research and education are not just 2 separate things, but they really feed each other, and kind of you have sort of those loops that go between your research and your educational activities, I think that is really great, and that definitely requires some planning. And so again, means that you need to start early to think about that.
I did see that a research administrator, I really appreciate this point, has recommended getting in all the non-technical documents up to date early and do them now. I think that's really important, because there's nothing worse than trying to, for you and the person doing the research administration, trying to get that done while you're trying to really focus on the development of the proposal and all of that. And then you've got all that going on at the last minute. Frustrates them, frustrates you. So get those done early. Just take care of it, get it done. If you've got one more publication that you're waiting to hear about, you can update it. I'm sure they don't mind if you update it, but just get that stuff done. And this person suggests getting them done now for July. So I think that's fine. Not a bad plan.
Yeah, the conflicts of interest Excel thing is the worst thing in the universe if you have lots of collaborators. So just emotionally prepare for that now. The one weirdly specific thing I was going to say was that I think one of the only parts of an NSF proposal that doesn't have a length limit is the facilities and equipment document, and use that to your advantage. Don't ever describe anything that could be considered facilities and equipment. Doesn't have to be at MSU. In the main text of the proposal, you can just say, see facilities and equipment, and then people will know to look there. So like I work with this NSF funded organization, Neon, and like my description of that was all in facilities and equipment. I funded my sabbatical next year through my career award, and that's like where I'm going. That's all described in facilities and equipment. So that's my weirdly specific thing.
I have no comment. Everybody covered that one, so I'll skip it.
We have another question from the audience. They say that I have an extension appointment. Can I integrate extension activities in the section of education activities, or is it strictly only educational activities?
It's hard to understand. It's hard to answer that without more context on that. So yeah, sorry.
But I guess, but education does not have to mean formal education is one way to think about it, right? That it doesn't have to be K-12 or, undergraduate, graduate. It can be, people use the term K to gray sometimes to, include adult learners and stuff. So.
Okay, great. We have one last question to sort of sum up. So maybe some parting words. How do you define a successful career proposal? I guess if you could just share your top tips for writing a successful career proposal.
that always feels like an N of one experience that you're sharing. I mean, I think for me, as I already mentioned before, you know, revising my career proposal and really having time to work it through really showed me how much time you can actually, if you have time to spend on your proposal and really make sure that everything is clear, you have given it several different people to read, not only people in your field, but really also people that are outside of your field. If they can understand it, it must be clear enough. But you know, share it also with people in your field so they can kind of look at the technical or the direct aspects of the research that you're proposing. You know, really take, I mean, as people mentioned before, make it look good so that it's clear. The reviewers don't have to look for anything. Make sure you're really consistent through your proposal. You know, if you're defining something in the beginning, that it continues, have a consistent formatting, that all, you know, subpoints or whatever, this is, you know, really clearly structured. And then see that, you know, the education and the research really work well together. And, you know, if that all makes sense and you're really excited about it and you read it, even though you have read it now so many times and you're like, oh yeah, you know, this now really looks good. I think this at least means you can be happy with it. I mean, it's always hard to say what's going to be successful because I think most, you know, a lot of proposals get submitted are really great and there's just not enough money to fund them. But I think at that point, at least you think, you know, you have a good feeling about it. And, you know, you've done your best, so to say. I think those are sort of helpful things. And those things really take time. I mean, we, you know, I guess I'm the only one saying this and I don't really want to sound sort of scary, like you need time, but you need to have time to settle, like have the proposal settle and then get back to it with kind of a fresh mind. And, you know, that's best not rushed if you can help it and organize it.
I'll just say, in addition to everything that I think we've already covered a lot of topics, but you know, I think just writing something you're excited about is more important than trying to fit into an NSF box. And I mean, I think the reality is if you're struggling to like fit what you want to do into what you think NSF wants, then, you know, talk to a program officer, but like maybe it's just not the right fit and that's fine too. But I think if you're excited about it, you know, both the education components and the research components, then that comes through and you'll be willing to spend a bunch of time on it. But yeah, like Yulia said, like, you know, I'm still really proud of my career proposal and I read it through and I'm like, oh, am I gonna really do this? This is gonna be cool if we do it. And you know, you don't want to just write it because you think you have to.
So I think we cover so many things and just I will recap some of them, but the thing is you need to be strategic here. It can be your publication towards where you plan to submit the career proposal in that area. If you have one or two, always good. Preliminary data related to the work, as well as your preliminary data related to your outreach, K-12, right? That's also that nice picture of you with the kids and those, always helpful. And strategic with the program officers as well. Talk to them, engage them, and then make sure what you are proposing is aligned to their programs. I think if you take care of these things, and then, yeah, I will say you also need a little bit of luck there. So that's also important. So.
One kind of maybe last point that I just remembered, an advice that a very cool mathematician professor once gave me. You should also write something that you actually want to do, both for the research, which I think is more obvious, but also for, you know, your educational activities. Because remember, if you get funded, you actually have to do those things. So if that's, you're like, oh, I should do this because it will look good, but I really, you know, I have a fear of talking to kindergarten children. Just don't put something in there. Like, fine. I mean, there's so many possibilities of what you can do. Pick something that if you get funded for it, you're like, yes, this is really awesome. I want to do it. And not, you know, not because it looks good, but because that's something, or something you really feel passionate about. It can be a lot of different things, but you know, if you get the money, you're like, oh no, now I have to do all those things. That's not a good feeling. So pick something that you actually want to do. So
I gave a lot of tips earlier, but I did want to finish with one thing. You know, I've worked with many assistant professors through the years, and it's interesting because the viewpoint and the perspective on proposals can make a world of difference. Some people really view them as this torturous experience. And if you make it a torturous experience, it will be a torturous experience every single time you sit down and write a proposal. You want to procrastinate, and it will be one of the worst experiences of your life. But that's part of our job. We write proposals. And so I would turn it into an enjoyable experience. Yeah, you're doing this, but it is the opportunity to explore. I mean, as postdocs, yeah, you can explore research as a graduate student, but now you really have the chance to explore. So just think about all the different wonderful things you can do and really let your mind expand on this and enjoy the experience of that. And so, turn this into a positive experience. Part of that is getting the stuff in early, but, really enjoy the experience, regardless of what happens, enjoy the experience to really expand and share your ideas and develop your ideas. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. I just want to give you all a shout out. This was so incredibly interesting and so insightful. Thank you for sharing your time and wisdom with us. I'll share here my screen. We have some more upcoming broader impacts workshops coming up. Let's see. And you can check them out on the University of Outreach and Engagement's website. We encourage you to sign up for these. The next one coming up is Broadening Participation in STEM Education and Careers, Promising Practices and Resources. That's coming up soon at the end of the month. We'd also ask that you could please take our survey. So you can scan this QR code. It will take you to our evaluation survey. We would really appreciate it if you would complete that today. So thank you very much. And Lauren, do you have any parting words?
No, thank you very much. And I guess my one parting word would be to take advantage of the resources that are available to you at MSU as you're looking at preparing your career proposal, because there are so many resources, both through the Office of Research and Innovation and through your individual colleges and departments, as well as university outreach and engagement. So I would encourage you all to explore what resources are available. And thank you all for joining us. It was a wonderful panel. We really enjoyed it.